guy who is wanting to like make it in the music business as a guitarist, as a singer, and it's not working. It's not working out, right? He's down on Broadway. He's not getting the gigs. He's not getting whatever he needs. And so he's singing this sad song, and then at the end, he just starts talking about how he's not going to give up. Well, the Bible has a story about Broadway. You didn't know Broadway was in the Bible, did you? Well, it's in there. It's not the Broadway in New York. It's a different one. In Matthew chapter 7, verse number 13 and 14, this is Jesus talking, by the way. Here's what he said. And I don't think I could read a passage of scripture more applicable than to 2023 than what I'm about to read to y'all. Like, it paints a picture of 2023 as good as anything I've ever read. Here's what it says. Enter ye in at the straight gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction. And many there be which go in thereat. Because straight is the gate, and narrow is the way, which leadeth to life, and few there be that find it. Whoa. Did y'all hear that? It's really interesting, because this statement that Jesus made is a polarizing statement. It's a polarizing statement in this passage, and he's showing us a contrast. He's showing us the polaric poles that exist everywhere in life. And we live in an age where people act like things can be one-sided. They act like actions don't have consequences. You can just do what you want to do. It doesn't matter who gets hurt. It doesn't matter what happens. There is no clearly defined right or wrong. That's what people would have us to believe. But life, like nature itself teaches us, that's a lie, because everything has an opposite. There's no such thing as a one-sided piece of paper. There's no such thing as a one-sided piece of bread. There's no such thing as a one-sided coin. There's no such thing as a one-sided situation. Everything has two sides. And in order for there to be a right, there has to be a wrong. Did I say that too fast? In order for there to be a right, there has to be a wrong. In order for there to be something good, there has to be something bad. We couldn't understand hot without cold. We couldn't understand up without down. We couldn't understand wet without dry. And we cannot understand truth without understanding there has to be lies. And the purpose of a lie is to deceive. And the purpose of a lie is to make the people who hear it believe that it's true. So we got to make sure that we are intimately familiar enough with the truth that we are not deceived by a lie that looks like the truth, by a lie that sounds like the truth, by a lie that is perpetrating itself to be the truth. We have to make sure that we're so intimately familiar with truth that when a lie rears its ugly head, we can instantly recognize that's a lie. In our world today, it seems like many people believe and behave as if there's no such thing, as there is such a thing as a one-sided perspective. Jesus told us about two paths. He told us about two directions on those two paths. And he told us about two destinations where those two paths lead. He told us to pick the unpopular path. He said, hear what he said. He said, straight is the way and narrow is the gate that leads to life. Reminds me of a passage in Deuteronomy. Remind you of a passage in Deuteronomy where God said to the children of Israel, he says, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. I set before you this day death and life. And then he said something that seems laughable unless you understand the human condition. He said, choose life. Now, why do you have, if you say, I set before you this day death and life, why do you have to tell people to choose life? Because this flesh, my flesh, your flesh, the human condition is suicidal. We do things that are in our own detriment. We eat in a suicidal manner. Some people drive. In Florida, it seems like almost everybody drives in a suicidal manner. Homicidal, suicidal, like I don't even know why we let all these folks in Florida. Anyway, but But we act as if, we live in an age where we act as if actions don't have consequences. And people are deluded into buying in to these, I mean, they're not even good lies. They're just big lies. And Jesus said, choose the unpopular path. Interesting thing about how he described the path that leads to light. He said, pick the unpopular path. He told us to pick the restricted and seemingly difficult path. You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of the easy hard principle. Y'all know about the easy hard principle, don't you? Here's how the easy hard principle works. In almost everything in life, easy on the front end equals hard on the back end. And hard on the front end equals easy on the back end. Hard leads to easy, and easy leads to hard. Oh, I'm talking real good right now. I might be talking fast, but I'm talking good. Like hard, like things that start off difficult, it's hard to say no to seconds on dessert. It's hard to say no to first. Well, right? It's hard. It's not hard to say no when there's an external temptation but no internal temptation. Y'all understand that, right? But it's hard to say no when there's an external temptation that matches our internal temptation. What does that mean? Like I'm gonna keep it real. I like dessert. I do. I'm just saying. I don't always eat it, but I like it. I always like it, right? But it also depends on the dessert. Like, there is no universe in which cheesecake is a temptation for me. You might try to tempt me with some cheesecake, and you might be tempting me from the outside, but you ain't tempting me from the inside. Because I don't like cheese. To me, cheese and cake go together about as much as peanut butter and pickles. Right. That's how you laugh because, like, as much sense as what I just said made, that's how much cheesecake means. But, man, some chocolate cake with some peanut butter icing? Shut your mouth. Right? But because I understand the easy hard principle, and I'm a foodie, like, I could easily be 400, 500, 600 pounds because I like food that much. But because I'm a foodie, and I understand the easy hard principle, you know what I do? I just don't eat till 2 o'clock. I don't eat till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I drink water. I might have a cup of tea in the morning, maybe, but that's maybe once or twice a week. And I'm not saying you should do this, but I'm just saying, like, I know me. I used to be 225 pounds, right? And was on my way to 370. Can I get it right? I was like, I wasn't playing. I was on a mission, right? Eat everything in sight and keep everything in sight so I could eat it, right? But the easy hard principle. Like, I remember when I decided that enough is enough. And I remember when I decided to start working out. And I said, I'm going to start working out. I'm going to ride. I'm going to do HIIT, high intensity interval training. What was I thinking? What was I thinking? And so I said, I'm going to ride my assault bike for 5 minutes, like hard as I can, and then get off the assault bike while my heart beats 150 something beats a minute, and then I'm going to do strength training. I remember I got into the first 45 seconds of that first time, and I asked myself, fool, what do you think you're doing? Can I get a witness? That more up here. How many of y'all know what I'm talking about? Like, when you first start working out, it's hard. And then after a while, though, you start craving it. All I'm saying is this, like, the paths that are the easiest on the front end are going to be the hardest on the back end. And the paths that are hardest on the front end are going to be the easiest on the back end. Just know that going in. So when you see something and there's an open door and it looks like the easy way out, just know that ain't how it ends. It's easy to get in, but it's hard to get out. Okay. No doubt, this whole idea of taking the difficult path, this whole idea of picking the unpopular path, there's no doubt that this is contrary to the way most people in the world live their lives today. Jesus was referring to the straight and narrow as the way we should go. And we live in a society in which the only sin now is to say that something is a sin. And the only absolute that exists in our world today seems to be that there are no absolutes. And that's what That's what the colleges and universities would have us to believe. That's what the politicians and the political elite would have us to believe. That's what the Hollywood elite would have us to believe. But I'm telling you, they're lying. They're lying because they want to control you and me and everybody else. And it's gotten so bad that they want to control what we say and they want to control what we think. To the point where if you disagree with somebody, even if you have a good reason for disagreeing, they want your voice silenced. Because the only weapon a lie has against the truth is to silence the truth. But you can't silence it. You can try to silence it, but it's like water. It's going to find its way in. It's like light. If there's an opening, it's going to find its way in. Have you ever stopped to wonder why people don't like the straight and narrow? I have. I think people don't like the straight and narrow because straight implies it's solitary. There's only one way. I love the fact that Jesus said, he said, I am the way. Not a way, not one of the ways, not a part of the way. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. And no man comes to the Father but by me. You ain't going to be good enough to get to God. Your good deeds are bad deeds. My good deeds are bad deeds. Like, this is why religion doesn't work. This is why God never started a religion. God is a king, and he's created a kingdom. And in order for you to participate in his kingdom, you got to yield to point number one. What's that? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by me, which means your baptism ain't going to do it. Your church attendance ain't going to do it. Your tithes and your offerings ain't going to do it. Your helping a little old lady or a little old man across the street ain't going to do it. Your feeding homeless people ain't going to do it. The only thing that you are going to do to be accepted by God is to stop trying to do anything and accept what God did. Because when you try to do it yourself, you are rejecting what he did, and if you reject what he did, he rejects you. Am I talking too fast? These celebrities that try to back preachers into a corner and then the preachers let them do it. Go get if you're supposed to be a preacher, go get yourself a Bible and try to read it. Well, yeah, I don't know. I just believe that. No, don't backpedal. I think there are a lot of humans in the world that have done a lot of social good, but they have a lot of bad ideas. Like, for instance, I might as well just name some folk. So for instance, like Oprah Winfrey, she's done a lot of social good, but she has a lot of bad ideas. And she'll back people into a corner and she'll say, well, do you believe that like Jesus is the only way? I wish somebody would ask me that. Yes. 100%. But what about all these other religions? That's the problem. They're religions. Jesus never started a religion. Jesus died on a cross to restore a relationship. Do you understand? Like, when we look at like the purpose of life, by the way, the patterns repeat themselves throughout all of life. And everything points back to the original story. What's the original story? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Well, why would he do that? Is that a good question? I don't know. It's the first question that came to my mind. He don't need anything, so why would he create a heaven and the earth? Well, because he is creative, and therefore it is his nature to create. It is his nature to create. God created the heaven and the earth as an expression of his creativity. God created the heavens and the earth as an expression of his creativity. That's pretty cool. Well, that's the first thing God tells us about God, by the way. The first thing God tells us about God is not that he is love, and it's not that he is holy, and it's not that he's righteous, even though he's all of those things. It's not that he is just and that he's judge. It's not that he is king. Those are all true. It's not that he's omniscient, omnipresent, or omnipotent. All of those are true, but none of those are the first thing that God tells us about God. The first thing God tells us about God is that he's creative. Why? Because the first thing he tells us about us is that he created us in his image, which means he created us to create stuff and he made us to make stuff. And so until I tap into the creativity that God placed inside of me, I am going to feel unfulfilled. That's why people don't like mindless work. That's why nobody wants to build a road that leads to nowhere. That's why people want to do things that have meaning, that matter, that have impact. Why? Because you were created to create. And some of us create Some of us, our creative expression is in music. Some of our creative expression is in film. Some of us, our creative expression is in language. Some of our creative expression is in carpentry. Like, it's all different. Like, we all have different creative expressions. Why? Because we need all of those aspects, and none of us have all of them, which means, well, before I tell you what that brings us to, so when God created, he created three categories in creation. He created creation, the sun, the moon, the stars, the trees, the grass, the water. He created creatures, the dogs and the cats and the chimpanzees and the alligators and the giraffes and bumblebees, etc. He created all of those creatures. But guess what? The creation, when God created the sun and the moon couldn't appreciate the fact that God created it. The dogs and the cats and the alligators can't appreciate the God who made them. So God said, I'm going to make one last thing because I've created creation, I've created creatures, but I'm disconnected from them because they are all physical and I am spiritual. So I am going to make an Aleph Daled Mem, an Adam, a man. Aleph is the letter in the Hebrew. So just to back up a little bit, Hebrew words are not just spelled, they're built. Like if I say H2O, you know I'm talking about water. See, I didn't say water, I gave you the components, you knew it was water. Well, just like when you say H2O, the people know you're talking about water. If you say AU, they know you're talking about gold. When you give somebody the components of a thing, you know what the thing is. Well, every Hebrew word, every biblical Hebrew word is not just a word that describes a thing. It's actually the letters. Each letter has its own definition, and each letter is the building block of the word. So if you look at the word for animal or beast, it's bahema. Bahema. What is that? What does it mean? In it is what it is. That's what an animal is. What does that mean? A horse is a horse is a horse, of course. Some of you are too young to know what that means. And clearly, most of you are too young to know what that means. So when you go home today, there's this thing called YouTube. Like, look it up on YouTube, the theme song for Mr. Ed. Mr. Ed was a talking horse, right? It was a show that came on in the 60s. Maybe even in the 50s. And we used to watch Mr. Ed and Wilbur. He'd have these conversations, but Mr. Ed would never talk in front of anybody but Wilbur. So everybody, like Wilbur would tell people about his talking horse, and they'd think he was crazy, right? So, but a horse can't talk. Because in it is what it is. And a horse can only do what a horse could do the first day a horse got here. A dog can only do what a dog could do the first day a dog got here. Like, evolution is not scientific. It's literally a racist theory. Like, it was started by a guy who was, like, it's documented. Like, go Google it for yourself. Google the original cover of The Origin of Species, because you will see that the subtitle of that book is a struggle for favored races a fight for favored races in the struggle for life. That's the subtitle of The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, who was not a scientist. He was a priest of some religious cult. I'm just telling you, it's not science. By the way, science, the very first principle of physics is what? The law of energy. The law of energy conservation. Energy is neither created, everything's energy. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, it just changes form. That's the first law. What's the second law? Entropy. Anything left to itself tends to move more and more towards disorder. So if you leave anything alone long enough, it will become worse to the point it becomes unusable. That's the exact opposite of evolution. Anyway, that was a side rant, but I thought it might help somebody. Right? So then God couldn't connect. He didn't have a connection where his creation or his creatures could appreciate him, so he created man. What is the word for man? It's Adam. Aleph, Daled, Mem. The letter Aleph is the letter that represents God. It's the strength of the ox. It leads the way. It's two yods and above. There's so many things about it, but it represents God. It's the beginning of the word Elohim and El Shaddai. All that begins with an Aleph. Okay, so Aleph. And then you have Daled Mem. What's Daled Mem? Daled Mem is the word dom in Hebrew, which means blood. Well, we know that the life of the flesh is in the blood. Right, okay. So a man, when God called their name Adam and Eve, God called their name Adam. Adam later called her name Eve. So when God put the man, the Aleph Daled Mem, in the garden, it was a godlike creature with flesh and blood. So now God, not only did God have creation and God have creatures, but God had creators that he could connect with. And we aren't God, but we're not animals. We're a combination of the spiritual realm and the physical realm. and we're the only thing like that. We are not a higher form of animal. We are very distinctly different from an animal because and in it is what it is what an animal is. But here's what a human has that an animal doesn't have: untapped potential. Like we have a spirit, breath. Animals have breath, but we are a spiritual being living in a physical body. So you say, Myron, why did you say all that? Because the first thing that we find that God created was creation. The second thing, he established connection with man. So that's why even if you're making a lot of money and you're really creative and you have a successful business, if you are not connected to other people, you feel unfulfilled. Why? God said it's not good for man to be alone. How did God know it wasn't good for man to be alone, besides the fact that God knows everything? How did he know it wasn't good for man to be alone? Because when God created the creatures and the creation, it wasn't good for God to be alone. And he made man in his image, so it can't be good for man to be alone. Right? So we have creation. So I feel fulfilled when I'm creating. Why? Because I'm made in the image of God, so I'm going to find fulfillment in creation. I feel fulfilled when there's connection. So when I'm connected to other people. And I think we need to put the arrow on like 71 or 72 because I'm hot and other people are hot. And I'm like, and if you can turn my fan on too, that'd be great. Sorry on YouTube that y'all had to witness me like doing that, but I'm about to have a melt off. I'm not going to melt down. I'm going to melt off right off of this chair. Okay. So he created creation, then connection. But guess what happened? Man did the unthinkable. He didn't yield to God, and he yielded to the serpent. He yielded to the enemy. And what happened? That severed the connection. So now the connection's lost. So what did God do? God sacrificed an animal to restore, as a picture of the fact that he would sacrifice his son. As a picture that you have to be covered by God, and there has to be shedding of blood, or there can be no remission or no washing away of sins. So when in Genesis chapter 3, when God covered Adam and Eve with animal skins, that is a prophecy. It's an archetype of the fact that one day I'm going to send my son to die on the cross for your sins. Now, why did you go into that big dissertation? Well, just because I want you to see that this whole thing, like solitary implies it's the one and only. That's why Jesus is the one and only way. It's steadfast. What does that mean? It's unchanging. It's not going to be Jesus today and the Pope tomorrow. It's not going to be Jesus today and Buddha tomorrow. It's not going to be Jesus today and Muhammad tomorrow. It's just period. It is what it is. You get to God your way and I'll get to God my way. That is the most arrogant, fake humility statement a person could make. What do I mean? For instance, I think all of us, I would consider us friends. Y'all feel like pretty friendly? If I knocked on your door, you'd say, come in, right? If you knocked on my door, I'd say, come in. Okay, but what if you caught me climbing in your kitchen window at 2 o'clock in the morning? Would I get the same, would I get the same greeting? No. Why? Because that is not the way that you have approved for people to enter your house. So as a human being, you can have a way, an approved way for people to come in your house, but God has to let us in any way we choose? How arrogant. How pompous. How pompous. That's a level of arrogance. Like, it don't matter how much money you have, that's really, you have really placed yourself in a very, very dangerous place. It's steadfast. It's solitary, it's steadfast, it's sure. Narrow implies the fact that it's straight, but the fact that it's narrow implies that there's some controls on your life. Hey, you know one of the things I discovered when I was studying Romans chapter 6, 7, and 8? I discovered that freedom, everybody say freedom. Freedom can only exist inside of boundaries. If there are no boundaries, there can be no freedom. If there's no restriction, there can be no freedom. Freedom is not freedom from boundaries. Freedom is freedom within boundaries. What do I mean? Well, you know why you had the freedom to drive down the road and come here? Because there are boundaries. They're called lines. White lines and yellow lines. They're on the road. What do they mean? You stay on this side, I'm going to stay on this side. It's those boundaries that give us the freedom to drive. Like, how many of y'all live in a neighborhood? Y'all live in a neighborhood? Wave at me if you live in a neighborhood. Okay, so you live in a neighborhood. Now, here's what a neighborhood means. It means we're neighbors. But here's what I don't want to see when I come home. I don't want to see my neighbor in my kitchen eating my food at my kitchen table when I walk in my house. Why? Because I got some boundaries around my house called walls. And I got some borders called doors. So you're free to eat all the food you want to in your house. But you're only free to eat food in my house when I invite you. Freedom can only exist inside of boundaries. If there are no boundaries, the only thing we can have is chaos. Which, by the way, is why when you look around the world, and well, around our country specifically, when you look at the states that are being run by these people who believe in no boundaries, crime is at an all-time high. There are stores, I want you to think about, wrap your mind around, there are stores in San Francisco that have to close down because of lawlessness, because of the ridiculous, self-contradicting ways of this whole woke ideology. It's ridiculous. It's a disaster. Okay, more on that later. Because we haven't even gotten to the Broadway yet. We're going to get there, though. I promise. So it implies restriction. It implies some controls in your life. There's our own freedom can only exist inside of boundaries. Now also implies resistance. What is resistance to? It gives direction to our life. Resistance gives direction. You're ever driving down the road and all of a sudden you get a little sleepy and you hear a right? It's telling you that you're off the narrow path. It gives you direction. It implies rules. It places some demands on your life. My parents used to say when we were children, well, if they don't get, they used to say this about other people's children. They don't get those kids under control. You might not, if you can't do anything with them now, the police will do something with them later. So, but we are not going to talk about look at the straight and narrow way today, even though we already did. We're going to look at the Broadway. The Broadway where the neon lights are bright. The first thing I want you to see when it says, I want to read the passage to you again just so you remember where we are. Enter ye into the straight gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction. What does that mean? If it's wide, that means a lot of people going through, right? A lot of people on that road. If it's broad, there's a lot of people on that path. So here's the first thing we see. We see, first and foremost, there is a permissive port down on Broadway. It says, wide is the gate. This is the gate where anything goes. When you live in a world where anything goes and the only thing that's wrong is to tell somebody that something is wrong, you are in a very dangerous place. The scripture says this about Eli's sons. So Eli was a prophet in Israel. And here's what the scripture says. His sons did evil in the sight of the Lord, and he restrained them not. Wow. Oh, by the way, his sons were grown men. And they did evil in the sight of the Lord. He didn't restrain them. I mean, when I say evil, I don't mean a little bit of evil. I mean, they were involved in prostitution. They were involved in fornication and adultery and just all of it. But guess what happened? They both died the same day. The Ark of the Covenant was taken. When Eli heard it, he was a fat man. He fell over backwards, broke his neck. He died that same day also. Why? Because he refused to put restrictions on his son. He allowed his sons. He allowed them to go down the permissive path. You are not doing your child a favor by letting them get away with everything. I remember one of my cousins came to stay with us for a while, and my dad didn't care. My dad just soon whooped the neighbor's kids as whoop his own. He said, I ain't going to let my children act like this in my house. I ain't going to let somebody else act like this in my house. My dad, I love my dad. He was so tough. My dad would whoop your child. And if you said something to him about it, he might whoop you. As a grown man, I wasn't fixing to give my dad no static. He built way too much respect all up in here. And so, but we live in a world that has a very permissive path down on Broadway. And what's really sad is now this permissive path is seeking to destroy the very fabric of our society, which is families. This whole idea of, first of all, let me say this. This whole idea that there's no such thing as a man or a woman is so ridiculously ludicrous. Of course, say, what is a woman? A woman is a female human, period, that was born a female human, not one that, quote, transitioned. By the way, I'm not hating on anybody. So here's what I know. I know that this evil of sexual sin has so permeated our society that the homosexual agenda has said, you let every other sexual perversion in, why not us? So we have parents saying to children, like, what's wrong with me? I'm a dude. What's wrong with me? Like having sex with a dude. They don't call it having sex though. They say love. Okay. So here's what real love does. Real love does what's best for the other person. That's what real love does. And by the way, I don't hate homosexuals. I got people, unfortunately, in my family who've declared themselves to be homosexuals. It's sad. Sad to me. Now, so how can you say it's sad? That's discrimination. First of all, do not, for you to imply that somebody believing that homosexuality is wrong is the same or equal to or even remotely close to the discrimination that black people have experienced in the United States of America, that itself is anti-black. Yes, I'm not going to take it back either. It's what do you mean it's anti-black? The fabric, the infrastructure of this company, of this country, was built on the free labor of my ancestors, who would turn over in their grave if they knew you were giving the same discriminatory language to that perversion as to our plight as human beings. And if you don't believe me, okay. Like when were homosexuals not allowed to like learn how to read? I'm asking a historical question. When were homosexuals not allowed to vote? When was it against the law for a homosexual to move from the South to the North in the Democratic South? Why do I keep bringing up the Democratic South? Because the Democrats, well, first of all, let me talk about all of them. Politics. Poly, more than one. Tick, blood-sucking parasite. These lifetime politicians that are elitist and want to make the rules for the rest of us to follow. It's so fascinating. The South was historically Democratic. A lot of people don't even know that. But the Democrats were in the South. They're the ones that were the Democrats were the pro-slaves. Now, the Republicans fought against slavery, but they really need to learn some compassion and some people skills. But the Democrats have really bad ideas. But politics as a whole, I don't have a lot of patience for it and don't have a really good way to get off the train, so I'm not going to get on the train. Not a fan. Not even sure that voting does anything other than distract us from the fact that our lives aren't working for a season. And if we do it every so often, I'm not sure it does anything at all. However, in case it does, I vote. So just so that in case it actually does something, I do. There's a permissive path down on Broadway. There's a permissive port down on Broadway, but there's also a passive path. Broad is the way, this is the path of least resistance. It's really interesting. Joshua and Caleb found themselves on this path. They found themselves on the straight and narrow. Moses sent 12 spies in to spy out the promised land. 12 of them brought back an evil report. 2 of them brought back a good report. The people believed the majority. By the way, right now we live in a society where we don't believe the majority. We just believe the minority that has the biggest mouths. Because here's what I know. Most people in this country, I would say a majority of people in this country know that homosexuality is wrong. And that by the way, and they use the term transgender, but they won't even define it what it is. So there's no definition. They just assume that everybody knows what it means. So define the word, okay? Anyway, most people know it's wrong. You know it's wrong for a boy to go into a girl's locker room. they identify. I identify as a Mack truck. I'm still a dude. And you say, you're being insensitive. Okay, so do you understand that's a two-sided coin? Do you understand that intolerance, like tolerance is an intolerant word. Here's what tolerance means. You're just so intolerant. Here's what that means. It means you want me to tolerate you, but you don't want to have to tolerate me. I have to tolerate listening to your point of view, but you don't have to tolerate listening to mine. If I grabbed a pen and a piece of paper, and said, hey, I'm going to write you a promissory note for $1 million. Here's a promissory note for $1 million. On the other side, I'm going to write the conditions. Do you want the promissory note if I don't let you see the conditions? No, you don't want the promissory note if I don't let you see the conditions. Why? Because you know it's dangerous to enter into a contract without knowing both sides of the equation. That's why it's so dangerous to silence the voices that speak out against something like homosexuality, the LGBTQ+1. I don't even know what all the initials are anymore. That's why it's so dangerous to make it illegal to speak out against it. People try to equate it to being like discriminated against as a black person in America, but do you understand that the LGBTQ1+ movement has more in common with slave owners than it did with slaves? You realize that, right? Because slave owners made it against the law to speak out against slavery. Did I say that too fast? Just like they're trying to make it against the law to speak out against. Why? Because they knew slavery was wrong. So you have to silence the opposing voices in order to make it work. And it didn't matter if you were white or black, it was against the law to speak out against slavery. So now they're making it against the law to speak out against sexual perversion. That's what the Bible calls it. By the way, somebody has to decide what's right or wrong. Might as well be God. Somebody's got to determine it. Somebody's got to say, this is right, this is wrong. Because otherwise, what are you going to say to your child when your son and your daughter when they say, Mom, Dad, we're moving in together? Okay, we'll go move in together. No, you don't understand. She's going to be my girl, I'm going to be her guy. No, but y'all brother and sister. Yeah, I know, but we're consenting adults. You do understand that's where it's headed. But what's wrong with it, Mom? Well, that's your brother, that's your sister. Yeah, but what's wrong with it? We're consenting adults. But if you have children, they'll be deformed. We're not planning on having any children. Now what's your argument? Let me give you all the statement of the day. If you want to write anything down, this is the writer downer of writer downers. You ready? It's wrong because God said it's wrong. That's a comma. That's not a period. That's a comma. It's wrong because God said it's wrong. And if that's not the reason, there is no reason. Did I say it too fast? It's wrong. Like, what's wrong? Whatever God says is wrong. Why? Because he's God. It's wrong because he says it's wrong. And if that's not the reason, there is no reason. We don't have to justify and backpedal. And I think we should be kind to everybody. I think we should be kind to people as a whole. We should be kind to homeless people. We should be kind to white people and black people and men and women and boys and girls. We should be kind to people who are doing things that we think are wrong. We should be kind to prostitutes. We should be kind to drug dealers. I mean, as long as it's possible, right? We should be kind. We should be kind to homosexuals. We should be kind to whatever the word transgender means. We should be kind to people. I'm not talking about being mean to people. I'm just talking about understanding and knowing that it's wrong. Do you understand how gender fluid I would have been as a teenage boy if they told me I can identify today as a boy and a girl tomorrow? I'm going to identify as a girl every time I go into the girls' locker room. And y'all cool with it. But that's the real danger. That's the real danger. Not to mention the danger of taking these dudes who have their body manipulated and then allowing them to compete against girls in girls' sports, and these girls are getting hurt and they're losing their opportunity to rise as a star in sports because you know it's wrong. That's why you're fighting so hard to silence the opposing voices. And I love these people and feel sad for them. I love them. I love the people in my family who decided that's the path they want to go down. But I feel sad for them. I'm not going to go along with it just because they're my family. That might be what Jesus meant when he said, if anybody loves their father or mother more than they love me. right? If they love their brother or their sister more than they love me, if they love their son or their daughter more than they love me, they're on the wrong path. Okay. Okay. There's a passive path down on Broadway. Don't take the road of least resistance. If the people who know something is wrong, if we don't start opening our mouths, they are coming for our children. They're already there. They're already coming for them in the cartoons. They're already coming for them in the miseducational, misdirectional system. They are coming for your children. Why? They can't have children. 2 dudes can't have a child. 2 women can't have a child. So they're coming for yours. They have to recruit yours. And in order to recruit yours, they have to silence your voice. They have to make your voice irrelevant to your own family members. And when they make all of your descendants homosexuals, they've cut off your family tree at the root. Wow. Well, because Satan is the ultimate anti-life. Okay. There's a popular perspective down on Broadway. There's a passive path. There's a permissive port. There's a popular perspective down on Broadway. Many there be which go in thereat. And everybody's all happy until they get there, until they get to the end. Broad is the way and wide is the gate that leads to destruction, y'all. Yeah, your first day with Satan is going to be your best day. I love what R.G. Lee said. He said the devil always pays in counterfeit money. His pearls are paste pearls. They have no value. His diamonds are lustrous plastic. And if you eat his corn, he'll choke you on the cob. The devil always pays in counterfeit money. Your best day with the devil is going to be your first day. Your worst day is going to be your last. There's a popular perspective down on Broadway. There's punishment predicted for those who go down on Broadway. It leads to destruction. This is where the place it ends up. It ends up in death. It ends up in destruction. I believe that if you die without Christ, that you will end up in eternal condemnation. That's what the Bible teaches. I can't make it something else. Hey, this is so important. Here's what the scripture says. Like, I'm all for making money. I'm all for being a business owner. I'm all for having friends. I'm all for connection and contribution. I'm all for creativity. I'm all for having a big YouTube channel, a big Instagram following. But here's what the scripture tells me. Riches profit not in the day of death. Money's good for what it's good for. But what it ain't good for, it ain't good for. And God don't care how much money you have. You know why? Because it's all his anyway. So let's get off of this wide, popular path that leads to destruction as individuals first. As families second, as communities third, as a nation. Let's get off this popular path that's leading us to destruction because we're afraid that somebody might be offended. Here's what the Apostle Paul said. Am I therefore become your enemy because I tell you the truth? You say, Myron, what are you saying? I'm saying Jesus is the only way to have eternal life. I'm saying the Bible is the best path for a good life. And I am saying if we don't take a stand right now while it's difficult, we are going to be ran over and they're coming to get our kids. So I know this is like kind of in your face, but only because I love you. Here's what the scripture tells me. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. I would rather wound you with faithful wounds of truth than deceive you with kisses of deception. Stay blessed by the best. I hope y'all can feel the love that I have for y'all in my heart. I love you. I love your family. I want the best for y'all. But we got to do the right thing. If we don't, it's a wrap. It's a wrap. It's over. Step up to the plate. Be a man. Be a woman. Be a man of God. Be a woman of God. Be a man for God. Be a woman for God. Let your life be for him and for the purpose for which he created you. You will be so glad you did. All right, my peeps. Get off of Broadway. Get on the narrow path. Stay blessed by the best. Peace out, Cub Scouts.